Hey everyone, in this series we're going to be looking through one of my favorite books related to software engineering, probably one of the most widespread and recommended books out there. It's sort of surprising that I haven't done this series already, but here we are. I've had the joy of reading it on my own as well as with a mentee, and we've had a great time. So without too much ado, let's get into the Pragmatic Programmer, the 20th anniversary edition. There's a great quote in the preface to this second edition, which is the creed of medieval quarry workers. And it says, "We who cut mere stones must always be envisioning cathedrals." We who cut mere stones must always be envisioning cathedrals. You and I are a very small piece of a team or a company or a civilization, and it'd be easy to say, well, I'm just a little guy. The stuff I do or don't do doesn't really matter. But the truth is that we're all more interconnected than we could possibly imagine, and the repercussions of our life and times go far beyond where we end. That's why this quote is here, and you would do well to be reminded of that and keep sight of it. So back to chapter 1. There's another quote, and I'm sure you've heard it before, from Annie Dillard. She says that how we spend our days is how we're spending our lives. That quote really convicts me and inspires me, and probably all of us, to try to be more intentional and examined and so on. And that's the call to action at the beginning of the chapter. The authors say the most important tip of the book is to remember that you have agency in your life. And so if you need to make a change, whether it's in your job or career or other areas of life, then go for it. And if it's to grow where you are and improve it, then you're meant to do that too. But it's up to you, and you have to identify what that is and make it happen and not sit on the sidelines hoping that that kind of improvement will happen on its own. The next section of the chapter is called "The Cat Ate My Source Code." And the main thesis is that you have to take responsibility for your work, both the good and the bad things that happen with it. One of the main cornerstones of a team's ability to work together productively is trust. Now, while it's easy to break, while it is easy to break, once you have trust built between teammates, it's a strong bond that's empowering to everyone involved. The second cornerstone is to take responsibility for things when they happen. It's so easy, and maybe even accurate, to blame third parties or other external factors when things go wrong, but you've got to resist the urge to do so if at all possible. The reason for this is that by doing so, in the long run, you can establish yourself as the one who's in charge of things both when they go right and when they go wrong. Personally, I've had mixed results with taking responsibility for things when they go wrong, and I think in a more cynical world, this taking responsibility for things could be a way that managers get their sheep to walk themselves to the altar. But in a less cynical world, I find that people appreciate in the long run, even though it's definitely not seen in the moment. People appreciate when you're forthcoming and willing to take a hit because of things not going according to plan. Part of taking responsibility means that you can circumvent any blame game that would otherwise go on and go right to offering solutions. And people really appreciate that. The last point that's made in this section is to not make excuses. That's certainly easier said than done. And I'm sure that the fight or flight mode kind of kicks in during tense situations when things aren't going according to plan. But that aside, if you can figure out how to offer solutions, perhaps take blame when it makes sense to, and so on, then that's showing yourself to be an owner and, dare I say, a pragmatic programmer. The next section is about software entropy. And the authors start out by saying that although code is free from most laws of physics, the one about entropy remains. As a result of the passage of time and your code being worked on, it will naturally get worse, and you have to address tech debt before it gets too out of hand and prevents the product from being made stronger and better. Here's an interesting question and analogy for you. What do you think causes an abandoned building to really fall apart? The big turning point for disrepair is when the first window breaks. Once that happens and it gets left untreated for a long time, others will break as well. Graffiti will be sprayed on, and so on. For the same reason, it's extremely important to fix tech debt and maintain high code quality, and not wait for the whole code base to deteriorate, because that entropy is a process that snowballs for the worse, much easier than it does for the better. Fixing tech debt is one thing, but ideally you should strive to not cause any in the first place. It's easier said than done, especially in the face of tight deadlines, as we all have. But for the long-term stability and quality of your product, it's absolutely necessary. It's been fascinating to see companies that never or rarely address their tech debt, and how over the course of time that decision to focus on speed at all costs is extremely expensive to repair. It's a tough tension to balance, though, because sometimes you just need the fastest to implement solution, and if you take too long, then your business might fail. Then your beautiful code that's so perfect isn't worth anything after all. There's no magic bullet for you with regards to the trade-offs in this section, but it's worth thinking about and keeping intention explicitly so that you land on a judicious execution strategy every time. The next section is called Stone Soup and Boiled Frogs, and it tells this parable, or fable if you will, of some soldiers who trick some starving villagers into sharing their food with everyone by way of a made-up food called stone soup. The parable is kind of long, so I encourage you to read that section in its entirety. But the point is that sometimes you have to more or less trick people into doing something that's ultimately good and valuable, even though it might not be apparent in the beginning. I've had the opportunity to do this type of thing on a couple occasions, and it was really interesting because, at least for the really notable one that comes to mind, the project was initially very unpopular. But then time went on and things started to get done, and others on the team bought into the idea. They started helping, and after a while the project spiraled up so much that the business this project was built for was saved from obsolescence. Really, not only that, but the initiative became one of the tenure-defining projects in my job. So I asked myself why a project so obviously valuable would be so unpopular at the beginning. But it makes sense because the value of it was only apparent to me and a couple others, and to everyone else it seemed like a big time and effort cost to the company and the teams that it affects. There's a great quote at the end of the section, though, that says, "People find it easier to join an ongoing success. Show them a glimpse of the future, and you'll get them to rally around." So I think this is essentially what happened, and truer words were never spoken. The next section is called Good Enough Software, and I must say the authors are not even one chapter in at this point, and they're already going for some heavy-hitting topics. So the term kind of suggests a degree of sloppiness or carelessness around the quality of the products you build, but that actually isn't what's being implied by the term good enough software. Rather, what the authors are saying is that you should make software that does what is required of it in such a way that is secure, maintainable, scalable, and so on. But not necessarily perfect, because we live in a world where there are other constraints on our efforts, namely things like business needs, time limitations, and so on. It takes a long time to build perfect software on whatever axis you might define it as such. And if you aspire to do that, you'll need to rely on not having any competitors who might overtake you. You'll need an infinite amount of resources and some highly sympathetic cross-functional partners who are, not going to wonder why things are taking so long. So, with the limitations of the real world being the case, how do you determine the correct course of action? According to the authors, it's a matter of asking users to speak to the trade-offs that come as a result of different options for the project's execution. This is, for you, an exercise in being judicious, though, because you don't want to present too many trade-offs lest you and the team and users get too bogged down to make any progress on anything at all. I've definitely seen this happen, and it's a decent strategy to employ if you're the kind of employee that cares solely about optics rather than actually building anything, because all of your time is spent attempting to posture, essentially, to your coworkers. And the code that you write gets perhaps less scrutiny than we'd want to admit. Personally, I do care about building things, and I assume you do too. So that's why I try to present trade-offs to teammates for things that make a consequential difference on the final product, and leave to my own judgment the things that don't. So you have to make those decisions on a case-by-case basis. The authors say programming is like painting, and that you start with a blank canvas, but you have to know when to stop. It's more art than science, and it is art and science. The next section is called Your Knowledge Portfolio and makes an analogy between investing in stocks and investing in yourself. Learning new skills pays dividends. Retaining existing skills also pays dividends. So there are 5 observations that are made pertaining to financial investing. And they are: 1, that serious investors invest regularly. 2, diversification is the key to long-term success. 3, smart investors balance their portfolios between conservative and high-risk, high-reward investments. 4, buy low and sell high. And 5, portfolios should be rebalanced periodically. So to bring those 5 concepts over to the world of having an engineering career, that you accomplish a similar thing of investing in yourself by doing things like reading books, learning new languages. You should always be aware of industry trends so that your skills can be relevant. For example, you should occasionally check the TIOB index to see what is being used these days to track trends. This will probably not come as a surprise to you, but C and Java have been the most popular languages for a long time. Python is getting close to that number 1 spot, though. But there's also some nuance to be seen throughout that list as well. One of the good pieces of advice I've heard is to be a T-shaped engineer, which means in the breadth of skills, you should know a little bit about a lot of things and a lot about a couple things. It is important to be specialized, but it's also important to at least be conversant in other topics that might come up in the day-to-day of your job. It's been my experience as well that picking up new languages gets easier and easier as you get more experienced. It's probably still hard to become a master of a new language, but becoming knowledgeable enough to be dangerous gets easier, I would say, as time goes on. There's a list of tips the authors have that I'll go through quickly, and they're all pretty straightforward. So they are to read technical and non-technical books, take classes, go to relevant meetups and other events, experiment with different programming environments, and stay current with the news. The last section of Chapter 1 is about communication. Believe it or not, that is probably one of the most important skills you can develop, because you have to be interfacing with a lot of people all the time across your organization. And there are a few things to keep in mind when delivering a message. The first is that you need to know your audience. Be technical when it makes sense to, and less technical when it makes sense to. If your audience doesn't understand you, you're wasting everyone's time. Second, know what you want to say. Rather than just having a stream of consciousness, you should aspire to plan things out beforehand. Third, choose your moment. Some times are better than others. Emails should be sent before 10 a.m. to optimize for getting a response, for example. And there are other ways to hack your timing as well. Maybe don't try to convey important messages at 5 p.m. on Friday evening. The other tips, in no particular order: involve your audience, be a good listener, get back to people, and have good documentation to support all of the above. All right, folks, that's all for this video. I hope you found it helpful and thought-provoking, and I'll see you all in the next one.